My son installed a security camera at my front door on Thanksgiving. He said it was to keep me safe. 3 weeks later, I watched the footage back and saw him letting strangers into my home while I slept. I confronted him. He told me I was imagining things, that my memory was slipping, that maybe it was time I stopped living alone. I almost believed him. But my neighbor, a retired FBI agent, had been watching too, and what she found made my blood run cold. My name is Walter, and I turned 71 on a Wednesday in early November. Nothing special about the day itself. The morning came in gray and cold the way mornings do in Knoxville, Tennessee, when autumn starts losing its grip and winter moves in quiet. I made my coffee the same way I'd made it for 46 years, 2 scoops, no sugar, a little too strong, and I stood at the kitchen window watching the last of the red leaves blow off the old maple in the side yard. Helen planted that tree the spring we moved in, 1978. She was 24 years old and 7 months pregnant with our first, and she insisted on digging the hole herself. I stood on the porch holding a glass of sweet tea, knowing better than to argue. That woman could do anything she set her mind to. 41 years of marriage proved me right. She passed 3 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. Fast and cruel the way that disease always is. One day she was pruning her roses. The next, she was in a hospital bed. And 6 weeks after the diagnosis, I was standing in Greenwood Cemetery, watching them lower the only woman I ever loved into the ground. The house got quiet after that. Not peaceful quiet. The kind of quiet that presses on your chest. I had 2 children. My son, Bradley, lived 20 minutes away in West Knoxville with his wife, Dana. He worked in commercial real estate. Or at least that's what he told me. My daughter, Suzanne, lived out in Portland, Oregon, with her husband and 2 kids. We talked every Sunday. She worried about me from a distance, and I could hear it in her voice every time she called. Bradley was the one who came around. He'd stop by on weekends, mow the lawn sometimes, check the gutters before storm season. After Helen died, he started coming more often. I appreciated it. A man doesn't like to admit he's lonely. But loneliness has a way of settling into your bones whether you invite it or not. It was the week before Thanksgiving when everything began. Bradley showed up on a Saturday morning with a cardboard box under his arm and that wide, easy grin he'd inherited from his mother. "Hey, Pop, got something for you." He pulled out a security camera system, one of those smart setups with a doorbell camera, 2 outdoor cameras, and an app that let you watch everything on your phone. "Dana and I have been worried about you out here alone. There've been some break-ins over in Farragut. I want you to feel safe." I looked at the box. It must have cost him $300 or $400. "Bradley, I've got a deadbolt and a 12 gauge in the closet. I think I'm covered." He laughed. "Come on, Pop. It's 2025. Let me set it up. You won't even have to think about it." I let him. He spent the whole afternoon drilling holes, running wires, downloading apps on my phone. He was thorough. I'll give him that. By evening, I could see my front porch, my driveway, and the back door, all from a little app on my phone screen. The picture was clear as glass, even in the dark. "There," he said, dusting off his hands. "Now I can check in on you too. The app lets me see the feeds from my phone. Just in case." Something about that sentence snagged in my mind, but I let it pass. He was my son. He was looking out for me. That's what I told myself. I wasn't in the kitchen anymore. I was in the backyard. Summer of 1994. Bradley was 12 years old, all elbows and sunburned shoulders, trying to cast a fishing line into the little creek behind our property. He kept tangling the reel, getting more frustrated each time. "Dad, I can't do it. The stupid thing won't work." I knelt beside him, put my hands over his. "Easy. Don't muscle it. Fishing is about patience, not force. You let the line go when it's ready." He tried again. The line sailed out smooth and dropped into the water with a soft plop. His face lit up like Christmas morning. "I did it." "You did it." He looked up at me with those brown eyes, Helen's eyes, and said, "Thanks, Dad. You always know how to fix stuff." The memory faded. I was back in my kitchen, 71 years old, looking at a security camera app on a phone I barely knew how to use. But I felt that same warmth. My boy was still looking out for me. Thanksgiving came. Bradley and Dana arrived early to help cook. I'd been doing the turkey myself since Helen passed, following her recipe card taped to the inside of the cabinet door, her handwriting still sharp and clear in blue ink. Bradley carved. Dana made her sweet potato casserole. Suzanne called from Portland and we passed the phone around the table. It was a good day. Almost normal. After dinner, while Dana was cleaning up and Bradley was hauling trash to the curb, I stepped into the living room and sank into my recliner. The football game was on, but I wasn't watching. I was looking at the empty chair across from me, Helen's chair. Nobody sat in it. Nobody ever did. Bradley left around 9. He hugged me at the door, held on a beat longer than usual. Love you, Pop. Love you too, son. I watched his taillights disappear down the driveway. Then I locked the door, turned off the porch light, and went to bed. 2 weeks later, I couldn't sleep. It was a Tuesday, maybe 1 in the morning. My hip was aching the way it does when the weather shifts, and I'd given up on rest. I went to the kitchen for water and picked up my phone out of habit. The camera app was still on the screen from earlier. I tapped it. The front porch was empty, just the glow of the streetlight on the concrete. The back door, nothing. The driveway camera showed my truck parked where it always was. Then I noticed something. The app had a history feature, a little clock icon in the corner. I pressed it, not really knowing what I was doing, and a timeline appeared. Every motion event from the past 30 days, time-stamped and recorded. I started scrolling. Most of it was mundane. Me walking to the mailbox, the FedEx driver dropping off a package, a stray cat on the back steps. Then I saw an entry from the previous Thursday, 2:47 a.m. Motion detected. Front door. I tapped it. The footage was crisp. That night vision green that makes everything look like a horror movie. My front door opened from the inside. Bradley stepped out onto the porch, looked around, then waved at someone. A moment later, a woman I'd never seen walked up the driveway carrying a folder. She handed it to Bradley. They spoke for maybe a minute, voices too low for the microphone to catch clearly. Then she left, and Bradley went back inside my house, at 2:47 inches the morning, while I was asleep. My hands were shaking. I scrolled back further, found another entry from 10 days before that, 3:15 a.m. Same thing. Bradley opening my front door, this time letting in a man in a dark coat. They went inside together. The footage showed them entering, but the indoor cameras, there were no indoor cameras, only exterior. I had no way of knowing what they did inside my home while I slept. I sat at the kitchen table until the sun came up, scrolling through weeks of footage, 4 separate late-night visits. Always between 2 and 4 in the morning, always Bradley, letting people in and out of my house like it was a train station. The next morning, I drove across the street to Ruth's house. Ruth Nakamura was 74 years old, a retired FBI special agent who'd spent 30 years working financial crimes out of the Memphis field office. She'd moved to our street 8 years ago, and Helen had befriended her immediately. After Helen died, Ruth was the one who brought me casseroles and checked on me without making it feel like charity. She had a way of being direct without being unkind. I trusted her the way you trust someone who's spent their life separating truth from lies. I showed her the footage on my phone. She watched it twice without speaking. "Walter," she said, setting down her coffee mug. "Do you have a will?" "Of course." "Life insurance?" $500,000. Split between Bradley and Suzanne. Who has power of attorney if something happens to you? Nobody. Helen had it, but after she died, I never reassigned it. "What about your house?" "Paid off." "Been paid off for 15 years. She was quiet for a moment. "Your house is worth what now?" $400,000? Close to 5, with the renovation Helen and I did in 2019. "Savings? Investments?" "My pension from the school district. 34 years teaching shop class and mechanical drafting. Social Security. An investment account Helen managed. Maybe 600,000. She was better with money than I ever was." Ruth nodded slowly. "Walter, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Has Bradley or anyone else recently suggested that you might be having memory problems? The question hit me like a sucker punch. Because yes, he had. 3 times in the past month. The first time was at Thanksgiving dinner. I'd told a story about Helen and me driving to Gatlinburg, and Bradley had said, "Pop, you told us that one already. Last week." I hadn't, but I let it go. The second time was at his house the following weekend. I'd asked about his work, and he'd said, "Pop, I just told you about that project 10 minutes ago. You okay?" I hadn't asked before. I was sure of it. But the way he looked at me, that careful concern, made me wonder. The third time was on the phone. I'd called to ask what time we were meeting for lunch, and he'd said, "Pop, we already talked about this. Remember? Noon at the grill place. We hadn't spoken in 3 days." I told Ruth all of this. She listened without interrupting, the way investigators do. "He's building a pattern," she said, "establishing a narrative that you're declining. Confused, forgetful, unable to manage your own affairs. Why? Because in Tennessee, if someone can demonstrate that a person is no longer capable of managing their own decisions, they can petition for conservatorship, full control of finances, property, medical decisions, everything." I stared at her. "My son wouldn't do that. The man in those videos is entering your home at 3 in the morning with strangers, Walter. That's not the behavior of a son who's just worried about your safety." She offered to help me investigate quietly. No police yet, not until we knew what we were dealing with. Ruth still had contacts, people who owed her favors from her decades in the bureau. Within a week, she had answers, and every single one made me sick. Bradley's real estate business was underwater. He owed $340,000 in debt, spread across business loans, personal credit lines, and a second mortgage Dana didn't know about. His biggest investor had pulled out 8 months ago, and he'd been borrowing from predatory lenders to stay afloat. He was 3 months behind on his own mortgage. The woman in the driveway footage was a private care assessor named Linda Foley. Ruth tracked her license. She specialized in geriatric capacity evaluations, the kind used to support conservatorship petitions. She'd been involved in 3 previous cases where elderly clients were found incapacitated and their assets transferred to family members. 2 of those cases were later investigated for fraud. The man in the dark coat was harder to identify. Ruth eventually matched him to a name: Craig Putnam, a disbarred attorney who'd lost his license in 2021 for fabricating documents in an estate case. He now worked as a consultant, helping families navigate conservatorship proceedings. "He's not just winging this," Ruth said, spreading her notes across her kitchen table. "He's hired professionals. People who know exactly how to make this look legitimate." Make what look legitimate? Getting you declared incapacitated. Taking control of your estate, your house, your savings, your pension, your life insurance, all of it. I thought about my son installing that camera system on a Saturday afternoon, drilling holes in my house with a smile on his face. The cameras weren't to protect me. They were to monitor me, to learn my routine, to know when I was asleep so they could enter my home and do whatever they were doing in there. "What were they doing inside?" I asked. "The cameras only cover outside." Ruth looked at me steadily. "I think they were going through your documents, financial records, medical files, anything they could use to build a conservatorship case. And Walter, I think they may have planted things." Planted things? Evidence of confusion. Unpaid bills left in strange places. Medication bottles moved around. Small things that would look like signs of cognitive decline if someone came to evaluate you. I drove home that afternoon and searched my own house like a crime scene. Ruth was right. I found a stack of unopened utility bills stuffed behind the microwave. Bills I'd never seen, addressed to me but with due dates already passed. In the bedroom closet, my medication bottles had been rearranged. The labels were turned backward, and 2 of the pill bottles had been switched. My blood pressure medication in the bottle labeled for cholesterol, and vice versa. In the desk drawer in my study, I found a notepad that wasn't mine. Someone had written on it in handwriting meant to look like mine but wasn't. Rambling, incoherent notes, grocery lists with items repeated 4 or 5 times. A sentence that read, Call Helen about dinner reservation. As if I'd forgotten my wife was dead. I sat in my study holding that notepad and felt something I hadn't felt since the war. Not sadness, not shock, rage. Cold, quiet, absolute rage. I was back in the hospital room. 3 years ago. Helen was awake. Barely. The morphine made everything slow. I was holding her hand, and she squeezed my fingers with whatever strength she had left. "Walter," she whispered, "promise me something. Anything. Don't let yourself disappear. After I'm gone, don't let anyone make you smaller than you are. I won't. Promise me." "I promise, Helen." She closed her eyes. She didn't open them again. I kept that promise. I was going to keep it now. Ruth and I worked together for 2 weeks. She was methodical, patient. Everything you'd expect from a woman who'd spent 3 decades building federal cases. We documented everything. The camera footage, the planted evidence, Bradley's financial records, Linda Foley's history, Craig Putnam's disbarment. Ruth contacted a friend at the Knox County District Attorney's Office, a prosecutor named James Whitfield who specialized in elder abuse cases. He reviewed our evidence and agreed to open an investigation. "Mr. Callahan," Whitfield told me over the phone, "what your son is doing isn't just morally wrong, it's criminal. Tennessee Code 716117 makes financial exploitation of the elderly a Class B felony. We're talking about potential prison time. What do you need from me? We need to catch them in the act. The next time your son brings those people to your house, we need to be ready." I agreed. But I also did something else. I called Suzanne. She picked up on the second ring. "Dad? Everything okay?" I told her everything, every detail, every piece of evidence, every late-night visit captured on the cameras her brother had installed. There was silence on the line for a long time. "Dad," she said finally, her voice breaking, "I'm catching a flight tonight." Suzanne arrived the next morning. She looked like she hadn't slept. We sat at the kitchen table, and I showed her everything Ruth and I had gathered. She went through it all with the careful focus she'd inherited from Helen. "I knew something was wrong with Bradley's business," she said quietly. "He asked me for money last year. 50,000. He said it was for an expansion. I gave it to him." She paused. "He never mentioned it again. He's in deep, Suze. That doesn't give him the right to steal from you, Dad. That doesn't give him the right to try to erase you." The operation came together quickly. Whitfield's team coordinated with the Knoxville Police Department. Ruth served as a civilian consultant, her FBI background giving her credibility that no one questioned. The plan was straightforward. I would call Bradley and tell him I'd been feeling confused, that I'd found bills I didn't remember receiving, that I was scared. I would ask him to come over and help me sort things out. I would suggest, as if it were my own idea, that maybe I needed someone to handle my affairs. I made the call on a Friday evening. My voice was steady, but I let it crack in the right places. "Bradley, I think something's wrong with me. I found these bills I don't remember getting. I forgot to take my medication twice this week. I'm scared." The relief in his voice was unmistakable. "Pop, it's okay. This is exactly what I've been worried about. Listen, I know some people who can help. A doctor who specializes in this kind of thing. We can get you evaluated, get a plan in place. I don't want to go to some stranger. It's not like that. She's very kind. She'll come to the house. It'll feel like a conversation. And I've got a friend who can help with the legal side, just to make sure you're protected. Would you come too?" "Of course, Pop. I'll be right there with you." He scheduled it for the following Wednesday. He was bringing Linda Foley and Craig Putnam to my house to conduct a fraudulent capacity assessment and get me to sign documents that would hand him control of my life. I hung up the phone and stared at the wall for a long time. I was in the garage. Summer 2001. Bradley was 19, home from UT for the break. He was helping me rebuild the transmission on my old Ford pickup. We'd been at it all afternoon. Grease up to our elbows. Classic rock on the radio. "Dad," he'd said, sliding out from under the truck, "I want to switch my major. Business instead of engineering. It's your life, son. You've got to build it the way that makes sense to you. Mom's gonna kill me." Your mother will support whatever makes you happy. She might just need a minute. He grinned. Think I'll be good at it? Business? I think you can be good at anything you commit to. He'd wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me with something close to reverence. I want to be like you, Dad. Steady. Someone people can count on. The memory dissolved. I was holding a phone that had just recorded my son's excitement about stealing my freedom. Wednesday came gray and cold. A freezing rain had coated everything in ice overnight, and the trees along my street looked like they'd been dipped in glass. Beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Bradley arrived at 10, carrying a leather briefcase I'd never seen before. Linda Foley pulled up 5 minutes later in a silver sedan. Craig Putnam came separately, parking down the block. Probably out of habit. I met them at the door. Played my part. The confused old man, shuffling, repeating myself, asking the same questions twice. Bradley guided me to the kitchen table with his hand on my elbow, gentle and solicitous, the performance of a loving son. Pop, this is Dr. Foley. She's just going to ask you some questions, okay? Nothing to worry about. Linda Foley was around 50, with a practiced warmth that felt like a coat of paint over something cold. She smiled at me the way you smile at a child. Mr. Callahan, it's so nice to meet you. Your son has told me so much about you. She opened a folder and began her assessment. Simple questions at first. What day is it? Who's the president? Can you count backward from 100 by sevens? I answered some correctly, fumbled others on purpose. Let my eyes go vague, repeated a question she'd already asked. She nodded and made notes, checking boxes on a form I recognized. The same kind of form Ruth had described. Pre-filled, predetermined. The conclusion had been written before she walked through my door. Craig Putnam sat quietly in the corner, a stack of documents on his lap. He waited like a vulture. After 20 minutes, Foley looked up. Mr. Callahan, I think it would be very helpful if we set up some support for you. Your son clearly cares about you very much, and with a proper legal arrangement, he can make sure everything is taken care of. Bradley squeezed my arm. It's the right thing, Pop. For your own protection. Putnam stood and placed a document on the table in front of me. A durable power of attorney form, pre-filled with Bradley's name as my agent. Broad authority. Finances. Property. Medical decisions. Everything. If you'll just sign here, Mr. Callahan, Putnam said, his voice smooth as oil. And here. And initial at the bottom. I picked up the pen, looked at the paper, looked at my son. Before I sign, I said, and my voice was steady now. No tremor, no confusion. I want to ask you something, Bradley. He blinked. Sure, Pop. Anything. Who was the woman in my driveway at 2:47 a.m. on November 28th? The color left his face like someone had pulled a plug. And the man in the dark coat on November 18th? And December 3rd? The cameras you installed for my safety, remember? They record everything, including you letting strangers into my home while I was sleeping. Bradley stood up. Pop, I don't know what you think you saw, but I also want to ask about the utility bills someone stuffed behind my microwave. The ones meant to look like I'd forgotten to pay them. And the notepad in my desk with fake handwriting. Call Helen about dinner reservation. You wanted someone to find that and think I'd forgotten your mother was dead. Foley was already reaching for her bag. Putnam was edging toward the door. Nobody's leaving, I said. The back door opened. Suzanne stepped in, followed by Ruth. Then the front door opened, and Prosecutor Whitfield entered with 2 Knox County Sheriff's deputies. Bradley Callahan, Whitfield said. You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, and fraud. Linda Foley and Craig Putnam, you're also under arrest. Bradley turned to me, and for 1 second I saw him, really saw him. Not the man who'd tried to steal my life, the boy in the garage with grease on his hands, the kid by the creek who couldn't cast a line. Dad, he said. I was drowning. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me, I said. You could have walked through that door any afternoon and sat at this table and said, Dad, I'm in trouble. And I would have helped you. I would have given you anything. You're my son. He started to cry. Not the dramatic kind, the silent kind, where the tears just fall and you can't stop them and you don't try. But you didn't ask, I said. You decided it was easier to take. You decided I was a problem to be solved, instead of a father to be trusted. The deputies led them out, one by one. Putnam went quiet, the practiced silence of a man who'd been arrested before. Foley protested, insisting her assessment was legitimate, standard procedure, until Whitfield informed her that the entire session had been recorded and her medical license review would begin immediately. Bradley was last. He stopped in the doorway and looked back at me. I'm sorry, Pop. I couldn't answer. I just stood there in my kitchen, in the house Helen and I had built our life in, and watched my son walk out in handcuffs. Suzanne put her arms around me. I don't know how long we stood there. Long enough for the ice on the windows to start melting. The investigation unraveled everything. Bradley had been working with Putnam for 5 months. The plan was methodical. Stage 1. Install surveillance to monitor my routine and identify when I was most vulnerable. Stage 2. Plant evidence of cognitive decline throughout the house. Stage 3. Bring in Foley for a compliant evaluation. Stage 4. Obtain power of attorney and file for emergency conservatorship. Stage 5. Liquidate everything. The house, the investments, the pension. Cash out the life insurance through a viatical settlement. A legal but predatory transaction where a third party buys your policy at a discount while you're still alive, betting on how soon you'll die. Bradley owed $340,000. Putnam was taking a 30% cut. Foley charged $15,000 per assessment. They'd done this before, in 3 other states, targeting elderly people living alone. The trial was in March. I attended this time. I needed to see it through. Craig Putnam received 6 years in state prison. His prior disbarment and the pattern of similar schemes across state lines worked against him. Federal charges were pending. Linda Foley received 4 years. Her medical license was permanently revoked. The judge noted that she had weaponized her professional authority against the most vulnerable people in our community. Bradley received a suspended sentence of 3 years. Probation, full restitution, community service, 500 hours at a senior center. The judge considered his cooperation with investigators, his lack of prior criminal record, and what she called the evident destruction of a family relationship that may constitute punishment beyond anything this court can impose. I filed a protective order. No contact for 1 year. I changed my will, my beneficiaries, my accounts. Suzanne helped me set up new passwords, new security questions, a new phone with new numbers. Ruth showed me how to check my credit reports, how to freeze my accounts if anything looked wrong. The paranoid precautions of a man who learned that the deadbolt on the front door means nothing when the threat has a key. Suzanne stayed for 2 weeks. We cooked Helen's recipes together. We sat on the porch and watched the ice melt off the trees. We didn't talk about Bradley much. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said in a courtroom. The night before she flew back to Portland, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, in Helen's chair. The first person to sit there in 3 years. Dad, come live near us. Portland's beautiful. The kids would love having you close. I appreciate that, Suze. I do. But your mother's tree is in the side yard. Her roses are out front. I'm not ready to leave her yet. She reached across the table and held my hand. She'd be proud of you, Dad. You know that, right? I hope so. I turned 72 alone. No gifts, no camera, no visitors. I made my coffee the way I always do. Stood at the window and watched the maple tree, Helen's tree, just beginning to green up in the early Tennessee spring. The house was quiet, but it was a different quiet now. Not the pressing kind, the settled kind, the quiet of a man who knows exactly where he stands. Some mornings I think about Bradley, not the man in the courtroom, the boy in the backyard with the fishing rod, the teenager covered in transmission grease, the young man who said he wanted to be like me. I don't know where that boy went. I don't know if he's still in there somewhere, buried under the debt and the desperation and the bad decisions. Maybe someday I'll find out. Maybe someday he'll walk through that door and sit at this table and tell me the truth, not because he wants something, but because he's my son and I'm his father, and that's supposed to mean something. But today is not that day. If you've stayed with me this far, I want you to hear something. I'm not telling you this story to make you afraid of your own family. I'm telling it because this happens more often than anyone wants to admit. According to the National Council on Aging, approximately 1 in 10 Americans over the age of 60 has experienced some form of elder abuse. Financial exploitation is the most common type, and family members are responsible for more than half of it. Here's what I learned the hard way. Pay attention. It might save you. First, be cautious with any technology gift you didn't ask for. If someone gives you a phone, a tablet, a camera system, a smart speaker, ask yourself who set it up and what access they have to it. Technology is a tool. In the wrong hands, it's a leash. Second, if someone in your life keeps telling you you're confused or forgetful, and it doesn't match how you actually feel, that's a red flag. They may be building a story about you, one that ends with you losing control of your own life. Third, never sign legal documents without an independent attorney reviewing them first. Not your child's attorney, not your nephew's lawyer friend, your own, someone who works for you and answers to you. Fourth, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, talk to your doctor. Isolation is the single greatest tool of the predator. The more people who know you, see you, and can vouch for your mental sharpness, the harder it is for anyone to build a false case against you. Fifth, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it is wrong. That nagging feeling in the back of your mind, that little voice that says this doesn't add up, listen to it. I almost didn't. It nearly cost me everything. My son made his choices. I've made mine. I still leave the porch light on at night. Not for him, just out of habit. Helen always left it on. Said she wanted anyone passing by to know someone was home, someone was awake, someone was paying attention. I keep it on for her. And if you're out there right now, watching this alone in a quiet house, wondering whether the people around you have your best interests at heart, I want you to know something. You are not too old to fight. You are not too trusting to be smart. And you are never, ever too proud to ask for help. Stay safe out there. Thank you for listening to an old man's story.